Hello, everyone, and welcome back to today's last segment of the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. I hope you guys have enjoyed this week of shows. It has truly been a pleasure continuing these player profiles. And we're going to close out the week with one last one of a tight end who certainly is in that divergent path 2, I'd like to call it, in terms of the tight end revolution, where he's a young, up-and-coming guy who could steal the headlines in fantasy for many years to come, and that young man is Trey McBride of the Arizona Cardinals. We saw last season that when Kyler Murray came back, Trey McBride certainly felt like someone who was his go-to target and someone he immediately entrusted with the burden of the offensive load. And so we're going to have to see how that translates next year, but the Cardinals will certainly be looking for someone to add that value for Kyler Murray, as well as that skill position group early and often in terms of production on the field and off of it for you guys. Without further ado, let's jump right into what makes Trey McBride so special. Only 133 points in his career, obviously. This was only his second year last year. He had 100.5 fantasy points last year, so that's the bulk of what his production is. So, the interesting things about Trey McBride. Early on in the season, when the Cardinals were rotating through quarterbacks like a carousel, he kind of was an afterthought in the system because the Cardinals were just trying to find their footing. They were just trying to find what worked. Jonathan Gannon was a new head coach without his star QB for quite some time, and that was a huge concern. But here are the stats that really make Trey McBride pop and could make people turn their attention to him if they're desperate for a tight end. From weeks 8 to 18, he was first in weighted opportunities and target share. He's fourth in yards per route run, second in missed tackles, fourth and fifth in PFF's receiving grade. Over a 10-game sample, he averaged 144 targets, 112 receptions, and 1,114 receiving yards. That's a tight end in only a 10-game span. So, the underlying theme here is that when given the right quarterback, Trey McBride certainly can be one of, if not the best tight end in the league. And the Arizona Cardinals are certainly looking for something. They're grasping on straws to find ways to really progress this offense. Next year, though, the fantasy odds are projecting him to have a very similar season. Not as prolific as last year, but fantastic nonetheless. 849 receiving yards for him for a total of 109.7 fantasy points. Now, like I said, the lovely thing about Trey McBride is it certainly seems that he's developing a rapport with Kyler Murray. It certainly seems like Kyler Murray entrusted him with a lot of targets, entrusted him with a lot of opportunities in that offense, and I have no reason to believe that it's not going to be the same to start the season. However, I do believe that the Arizona Cardinals do want a wide receiver to be the face of that offense as well, because over the years, Kyler Murray has had so much talent at the wide receiver position, starting off with guys like DeAndre Hopkins, Marquise Hollywood Brown, and guys of that nature. And so, I truly think that Trey McBride will have another fantastic season, but the Arizona Cardinals don't just want Trey McBride to be a security blanket and a get-out-of-jail-free card. They want Trey McBride to be a solid tight end in an even better skill position room for the Arizona Cardinals. And so, I truly think that what Jonathan Gannon will do is ask Kyler Murray to spread the wealth around, because Kyler Murray certainly has the arm strength, the accuracy to be a fantastic quarterback, and understand that you can have a go-to target, but you can also have supplementary players, tertiary players, so to speak, who can give you that extra oomph to your offense. Because Kyler Murray is done waiting. Kyler Murray wants to win now. And he has to win now because the Cardinals have placed so much weight in the decision to keep him that if he fails, then who knows what path the Cardinals are going to take. And who knows how Jonathan Gannon is going to play a part in that role. And so I really truly think that while Trey McBride certainly is going to play into the Cardinals season, and how well this offense plays. He certainly is not going to be as prolific as he was last year. That's a non-starter. I think that in terms of, let's bring it back to the tight end revolution, shall we? In terms of the tight end revolution, especially in fantasy, Trey McBride, because of his status as someone who nobody's really heard of up until now, the hype might not be justified. I think that in order to truly get the most value out of Trey McBride, you have to look at other guys in the tight end revolution and compare them, because when put on a pedestal, let's say a guy like Sam Laporta, obviously Trey McBride did not have as much value as Sam Laporta, because Sam Laporta ended up being the tight end 1 overall. Say what you will about the tight end 1 season, but it still stands the test of time for Sam Laporta. So Trey McBride is always going to be labeled a part of that tight end generation. He's always going to be inextricably linked to guys like Sam Laporta. And so, because of the fact that everyone kind of jumped on the Sam Laporta train, everyone followed Sam Laporta throughout last season, everyone saw Sam Laporta for what he was, that's how you get an attention as a young tight end, because as a young tight end, you're on the other end of the spectrum. When I'm talking about guys like Kelsey, Kittle, Andrews, they have the pedigree. They stand the test of time. They don't have anything left to prove. They know that they're commodities on the open market. They know that fantasy managers everywhere want them. They don't know that because they're not that concerned about fantasy, but you get my gist. Trey McBride, on the other hand, definitely has a lot going against him. He does not play for a highly prolific, high-point scoring offense. He is in a skill position group that really isn't that talented, very barren in fact. He's coming off a season where he had a very fantastic stretch, but it was with a quarterback who's going to have a lot more pressure on him this year. And furthermore, he's up against a whole generation of tight ends who already feel like they are established in this league. And so, Trey McBride, in fantasy terms, is a streaming option at the very most next season. You can't toss all your eggs into one basket with this guy. However, I do think that starting off with that foundation, starting off with that 10-game sample with Kyler Murray, could be able to create something there. Because when you're playing with a quarterback you're unfamiliar with throughout most of the season, when a guy just comes in off an injury, you immediately want him to feel like you're a guy you can rely upon. And the fact that Trey McBride had that 10-game sample is something. I can't necessarily say it will carry over into next season. I hope it does, because for his sake, he needs to maintain that status in order for people to further value him, and for me to not sit here saying that he's just potential and nothing else. But ultimately, it's better for him to go through that first experience where he was an afterthought early and then come onto the scene later in the year than to just be going into the season with blind faith. Because then I really would look a fool sitting here telling you, go draft Trey McBride, he's going to be the next big thing. He's going to be better than Sam Laporta, because in all reality, he isn't. Because Sam Laporta, yes, the Detroit Lions are a better team, but he's a better player, and he knows that. Trey McBride doesn't know what the future holds for him in Arizona. He doesn't know what the future holds for the Arizona Cardinals organization. in 2 or 3 years, the whole Arizona Cardinals organization could look drastically different. But what I do know is that there is hope in this. There is a huge optimistic aspect